G'day World Wide Web, Lew Dub here on Staying the Distance, the Melbourne Cup Channel, formerly known as Lew Dub's personal best. Today I'm bringing the world's most detailed preview of the Melbourne Cup Qualifier, also known as the Bart Cummings. This is the fourth win and you're in race of the 2023 Melbourne Cup. So far we've had Goldman, Lunar Flare and Absurd win their way into the Melbourne Cup. Who will be next? Well, hopefully after this runner-by-runner preview you will have a good idea. Before the video is done, we'll also have a look at the track and the barrier position. But first, let's learn a little about Bart Cummings, the man the race is named after. All Melbourne Cuppers know Bart, we love Bart and we respect him. Bart Cummings trained a record 12 Melbourne Cup winners. It all started in 1965 when Lightfingers stole the cup at 15-1. Bart had a drought through the 1980s but bounced back with 5 more cup wins between 1990 and 2008. And a little known fact about Bart's 12 winners is that only 2 times did his Melbourne Cup winners wear the famed green and gold diagonal stripes with white cap. Okay, now let's look at some facts on the race. So far, only one horse has won the Bart Cummings and the Melbourne Cup in the same calendar year. That was Al Mandan in the first year the race became a Melbourne Cup qualifier, 2016. Since then, the best performance by a Bart Cummings winner has been 5th. That honour is shared by 2 horses, Surprise Baby and Persan. Ash Rum, the 7-year-old, came out to Australia in 2020 and made it into the Melbourne Cup of that year, but didn't run up to his potential and did not race again until his 7th over 1700 metres in mid-September this year. The Bart Cummings is certainly a more suitable distance and gun jockey Mark Zahra is on board, so if he gets back to his best Ash run, he'd definitely be competitive here. Goldman, the 5-year-old, is already in the Melbourne Cup field, so no need for him to win, but so far this prep he has run below expectation. First up over 1600 he finished 6 lengths back, then in the Naturalism or MRC Foundation Cup he started at 7-1 and could only manage a fading 3.4 lengths 6th. You might think, well, at this stage of his prep he wasn't supposed to win, but the horse had 3 trials prior to his first run back. Maybe this is the race where we see him start to peak. He's the equal top weight. Sheraz. You may remember Sheraz from his 2nd in the Sydney Cup of 2022. His 2022 spring campaign was cut short due to injury, so Sheraz comes into the Bart Cummings with 2 runs under his belt since October of 2022. The first run didn't look good at all, but his run in the Group 3 MRC Foundation Cup was a window into the kind of form he displayed prior to his Sydney Cup 2nd. An important factor for Sheraz is that every one of his 4 wins has been on rain-affected ground. Serpentine arrived in Australia as a one-dimensional frontrunner who couldn't be restrained by jockeys. He's a bit smarter or sedate now. He doesn't have to lead. After running in last year's Melbourne Cup and barely finishing, he only returned to the track in late April for a short Queensland campaign. Since then, he's had 2 starts this spring prep, with his most recent being a pretty honest 4th at this track and distance. He gets some relief at the weights and should be very competitive. Sir Lucan, he ran a reasonably strong 4th in the Group 3 Colin Stephen recently and does get 1 kilogram weight relief in comparison to Athabaskan, the winner of that race. However, he was the leader in a steady 1.5-mile contest. His run prior was a disappointing 12th in the Newcastle Cup over a similar distance. I can't see him winning. Virtuous Circle. This 4-year-old ran 2nd in the ATC Derby earlier this year. He was also 2nd in the Drummond Golf Vase over 2,040 metres at Moonee Valley. That was another black type race for 3-year-olds. So far his 4-year-old campaign has been less impressive. One reason for that may be the lack of rain. His Derby 2nd was on heavy ground, as was his Vase 2nd. In his last start he was 4.5 lengths 9th in the Naturalism Stakes, aka MRC Foundation Cup. and didn't do enough to convince me that he's a threat, but they have lined up top jockey Damien Lane. Athabaskan, the 4.5-year-old gelding, has had 18 starts for 3 wins, 2 of those wins in his last 2 runs. He started his career in France and in late 2022 landed in the hands of John O'Shea. He had an autumn campaign that didn't reach any great heights, but as is often the case with Northern Hemisphere imports, their second prep is better. Anyway, a couple of worrying form references are that he only narrowly beat Al Abir in his last win, then Al Abir was well beaten in the Group 1 Metropolitan. The other one is that he beat Serpentine, one of his opponents today, by 2.5 lengths, but had 6 kilograms less on his back. In the Bart Cummings, Serpentine carries just 1 kilogram extra. Well, what a career she's had. High Emotion. A remarkable 2020 where she blasted her way onto the scene with 3 wins on the trot during the colder months, and the stars really aligned for her in 2022 with that Melbourne Cup tilt when she stormed home for 3rd on a soft 7 Flemington track. Unfortunately for her fans, she failed to take flight in her Sydney Autumn campaign. There was a glimpse of her best in the Chairman's Quality when she made ground for 4th, but then failed in the Sydney Cup. So far she's had just 1 start this spring preparation, and it was a mediocre 7th in the Wyong Cup. Hopeful, this 6-year-old gelding's last start can be written off due to interference when he virtually dropped out of the race in the Wyong Cup, 3 horses falling. But his form prior isn't that convincing. Back in June he was 13th at Flemington over 2,540 metres. There was a second in his brief winter campaign. That was on a soft 7 over 2,520 metres. But I think Connections will be hopeful of a sudden downfall and heavy ground to be competitive. 5-year-old gelding Alaskan God. He was the WA Derby winner of 2022. Since then he's had 9 starts for 0 wins and 2 placings. He's now up to his 5th run in this prep. He should be rock hard fit. His last 2 starts he got within 3.8 lengths and then 2.8 lengths, so not too far away, but in this race he has to carry 2 kilograms extra, and despite having a pretty cushy run in the Naturalism Stakes, his last start he didn't exactly go past his opposition like they were standing still. To be honest, I don't think 2,500 metres is his trip. Jamie Carr is on board, though she's not back to her best yet. Ahmad. 9-year-old Ahmad is the oldest runner in the field, and despite that, his career best result came earlier this year when he was 3rd in the Adelaide Cup. After that, he came back to earth with a thud in the Sydney Cup, finishing 9.5 lengths 12th, then failing in the Andrew Ramsden, carrying 58.5 kilos. He's had 1 run this spring, and he did run on well over the unsuitable 1,700 metres. He gets a bit of help from the handicapper and is far from the worst. Fancy Man, another of the roughies. The 5-year-old looks like being one of those Northern Hemisphere imports that fails to reach any heights. This is his 2nd prep in Australia after a midfield finish in the 2022 Ebor Handicap, carrying 62 kilograms. But so far in Oz he's been on soft ground, good ground, over 2,000, 2,400 metres, and the closest he's got is 2.8 lengths, 5th in the Group 3 Premiers Cup back in August. Nope. Hasta La War. He's now 8. He really surprised me in the Andrew Ramsden back in May when he finished 3rd in that race. Mind you, he was 6 lengths behind the winner Lunar Flare. Last year he showed some promise in the spring with a 3rd in the Group 2 Herbert Power and 3rd in the Group 3 Geelong Cup. But in the lead up to those races he didn't finish 12 lengths back like he did in his most recent start, the Naturalism Stakes. Can't do it. Interpretation, another Northern Hemisphere failure at the moment. To my surprise, he made last year's Melbourne Cup field. Unsurprisingly, he failed to finish when Craig Newitt pulled him up, thinking something was wrong with the horse, but post-race scans revealed the horse was completely fine, maybe just hopeless. He returned to racing in late July, and while not disgrace, It's hard to see him being competitive here, especially considering in his last start he finished well behind Serpentine and Mostly Cloudy, two of his more prominent opponents in the Bart Cummings. Future history. Well, this 5-year-old import looks like he might be that special one that training duo Kieran Maher and David Eustace unearth every Australian winter. This is his first campaign in Australia and he's picked up 2 seconds and a win already. To date, the furthest he's been tried in Australia is 2,000 metres. In his last start, he went out as a $3.40 favourite but finished second. Watching that race, it appeared to me that Future History, who had been headed by young Werther, had plenty in the tank. And the fact that Craig Williams has been assigned to Future History may be evidence that he'll stay the 2,500 metres rather well. Mostly Cloudy. This is the 4-year-old's first prep in Australia. His last run in the UK was at a good level, the Group 2 Lonsdale Cup over 2 miles. He did finish well back there, but in that race he was up against some of the world's best 2-milers. His last start was a very impressive 2 lengths win where he beat some of his Bart Cummings opposition in Serpentine and Interpretation. Now, those two do get some assistance from the handicapper in Saturday's race, but falling back on some old weights and measures principles from the great Don Scott, I still have Mostly Cloudy in front of them two. The one thing against Mostly Cloudy is he's been up for a long time. His prep commenced in late May, he's had 7 starts. He did get a 4-week break between August and September though. There are plenty of positives on top of beating some of these Bart Cummings opposition. He's young and he's won at the track at this very distance. I'll just give quick mention to First Immortal, who is one of the emergency runners. At time of publishing, he is still looking like missing out on a run. It's quite bizarre. At this moment, he is favourite for the race, but may not even start. Based on his last start win, he is a big show. He was racing in a benchmark 78, but carried 63 kilograms and managed an easing 3.5 lengths win over 2,000 metres. Another factor in his favour is he's already won over 2,500 metres at Flemington. Daniel Stackhouse is set to ride. Now a quick look at the track. The race starts rather close to the finishing post and runners have about 200 to 220 metres before the first turn. I remember retired Kiwi jockey Michael Walker recently saying that this was the most difficult starting position at Flemington if you're jumping from a wide barrier. And First Immortal has drawn the widest barriers, so if he does get a run, he'll have his work cut out for him. The front runners that have drawn favourably are Goldman and Future History. On screen now is Racing and Sports Speed Map tool. It's great and I'm not affiliated with that website, but the Speed Map allows users to move the runners into positions they believe the runners will settle. The positions you see the horses in on screen have been edited by me. If you just use Racing and Sports auto setup, you'll see something slightly different. Anyway, I think they race around Flemington in a formation similar to what's on screen, and looking at that, At the Baskin and Mostly Cloudy should get their chance on the big Flemington track. There has been a lot of money for Sheraz, by the way, but unless the track softens up, I find it hard to have him. In summary, I think it's too hard to pick one horse, so I'm going to try an exotic. I'll have Future History, Goldman, the Serpentine, At the Baskin, Mostly Cloudy and Alaskan God to fill the first 4 in any old order. Please feel free to put your own tips and thoughts in the comments. It'll help boost the video too, by the way. Check the odds, pick a winner.